Well, hey, Stonebriar family. This is Pastor David here with our marriage ministry. Welcome to Tuesday night marriage night. Marriage night, or we like to say that Tuesday night is marriage night at Stonebriar. And so we are here in our large group format, and it's kind of our first week off that. So we wanted to kick it off with someone that we all know and love and just are blessed by every time he gets a chance to share. Joining me tonight is Pastor Steve Fischer. He is the lead pastor of our Care Ministries at Stonebriar Community Church and a great friend and encourager. And we always love to hear what God has put on his heart to encourage us, challenge us when it comes to our marriages and how we can move forward. So, Steve, tell us a little about yourself and how you got started, and then why don't you just take us to where you want to take us today?
Sure. I am been here at Stonebriar for about 16 years. Graduated from the seminary in the late 90s, went into private practice as a licensed counselor, and had the great fortune of being invited to join the staff here at Stonebriar. And I love being a pastor. I absolutely love being a pastor. Any of you who feel like you are doing what God has called you to do, you know what it feels like. And humbly, I'm unbelievably blessed. So I like what I do and who I do it with and why I do it. And that is indeed a blessing. Mm-hmm. That is indeed a blessing. So these are interesting times, aren't they, David?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Unprecedented.
For the first time, literally everyone on the planet has experienced the same thing. And
right.
It's a good conversation.
Yeah, it sure does. So I heard a saying, it was last week, and very short, but it said, when you can't go outside, go inside. And that's an interesting twist on those words. And so I have been going inside meaning metaphorically, kind of what are you thinking? How are you feeling? And so I wanted to share something with all our marriage core family that I hope speaks into perhaps a little bit of what you're going through, or perhaps gives you some encouragement, or perhaps gives you an opportunity to think differently about this time. So back when I worked at Texas Instruments, Stephen Covey, a renowned business consultant, published a book, and it said, "Begin with the end in mind," which is an interesting statement for Christians and for all of us at that point. And so I want to talk a little bit about what I'm calling the law of the garden. And I grew up in Wisconsin, and we had this little garden in back behind our garage, and it was my responsibility to take care of the garden. And one of the beautiful things about God's creation is that he's a very harmonious God. And in his two creations of nature and man, there's incredible symmetry. And so that's kind of where I've been thinking that going inside. And I've shared a little bit of this before, but it's really caused me to think as well. And so beginning with the end in mind, simple fact that if you're wanting to grow corn, you don't plant beans. You know, you don't harvest beans if you've been planting corn. And so I think, again, in the parallel designs of nature and man, these handful of steps seem to occur. So before I planted the garden, I had to break it up. I had to take away all the rocks that have gotten thrown in there and all of the hardness from the long winters in Wisconsin. And so I had to break up the soil of the garden. And in breaking up the soil was a real violent process. The soil had become hardened, it become crusted. And so it was a lot of work, and it was a very violent process. And obviously, if the soil had feelings, it was doing just fine, and something came in and destroyed it. And again, I want you to kind of hopefully see a parallel as to what's happening now. This COVID-19 is like a violent spade that's been put in our life that has chopped up things that we've known, where we go to eat, how we move about in our freedoms, and just a plethora of things that this season has changed for us. And most of us, it's been a rough, violent introduction of something that we didn't expect at that particular point, from our financial stability, our jobs. We can meet together as a church, as people and families. So it's been a really violent process, but it's necessary, I think, to be able to do what the next step was, which was planting. Really believe that we learn much through what's called cognitive assent, meaning we just learn it. I think we like to feel that way, but the real deep things seem to come, at least in my life, through trial and error, through being put in a circumstance that I've had to lean on my God, lean on my brothers and sisters. And it is in that time where I think the biggest lessons have come. And so the law of the garden states that the first process is there has to be an unsettling, a breaking up of the way things were. And then at that time, you were able to plant the seed. And so there has been a breaking up of the way things were in our families and in our lives. Seeds are you planting? What is it that you're planting? Are you trying to plant graciousness when we were talking earlier, Dave, when there are arguments, you're breathing too loud, stop breathing, those type of things. We're getting on each other's nerves. But it's in that time, are you planting the seed of a better communication? Are you planting the seed of opportunities to be still and quiet with each other? Are you planting the seed of, we've never prayed with each other, but man, this seems like a good time to start to learn how to pray. What seeds are you planting after this disruption that has occurred? And then the next part of the garden work was beginning to nurture and take care of that seed you planted. And so that's where the efforts come in. I remember having to weed, to be very aware of if the rabbits were eating the plants, the tomatoes, and we had to put the chicken wire around the tomatoes so the rabbits wouldn't eat that, and put a little fence around it so they wouldn't eat the lettuce. And so I was tending to that garden. And the question hopefully speaks for itself. Are you tending to the garden of your marriage? What are the seed that you planted? And then as that seed begins to grow, are you tending to it? Are you taking care of it? I couldn't walk away from the garden for a week, for 2 weeks, and expect everything to be okay. And the reality is, a lot of us, mine included, in our marriages, we get so busy in 16 different ways that we may not have tended to it in a long time. That's why I think Marriage Course is so beautiful. It compels you to tend to this garden. And so as you're tending to the garden, you begin to learn and understand even the nuances of plants. I remember distinctly going, okay, this plant's not growing quite as this, and this part of the lettuce is growing. And I really, it sounds crazy, but I got to know that garden. What does that mean to a marriage? So I can tend to the garden, I can plant the right seed, I can tend to the garden. But the truth is, there's a certain amount of things that I cannot control, that God controls. Does a storm come up? Is there enough sunshine? Is there too much water? Is there not enough water? Things that I have limited capacity to really control. I can irrigate a little bit, but what if as is wont to happen in Wisconsin, a massive storm comes in and dumps tons of rain or wind, or there's no sun, or there is sun. So there's a certain dependency that the gardener has on things that they can't control. And then really, indeed, pray for God's divine grace and intervention. And this is, again, for a silly little garden in my backyard. I was proud. I wanted to show my father that I could take care of this garden. I have a distinct memory of that. And so you plant the right, there's a breaking up. You're planting the right seed. You're doing everything you can do to tend to what you can do. Then you pray dearly that the things you can't control, that are left to the purview of the Creator, that He takes care of that garden, helps you, that He does what He can do. And then there's a season where you just do that vividly, that you would come out at some morning and you begin to see life in those plants, a little tomato forming. We'd grow little watermelons, a little watermelon forming. And you would be so encouraged because you would see some benefit from your work. And it was encouraging and it kept me going. And then you would think that some would grow and then it would just kind of shrivel out and pass away. The plant never grew any further. The fruit never ripened. And you'd get discouraged, but you keep going because there's other fruits that are coming. And again, that metaphor plays very nicely, I think, in the marriage. Some things you do and they work, and some things you do, you don't, but you don't quit. You don't quit. So I would ask a neighbor down the street was a farmer, and so he had a big garden. And I remember going down to him and saying, okay, what am I doing wrong? How am I not tending? We got to pull these leaf buds off, because if you don't, it gets too leafy and the fruit won't get sun. And these little hints and ways to help my little garden grow. And they were wise, but I didn't quit just because some of the fruit didn't pay dividends. Some of the effort didn't manifest in fruit. And then there's that beautiful day when the garden has a bounty, and and then you begin to harvest, and you begin to actually produce enough fruit where you could share it and you can give it away. And I think that's the beautiful piece of the cycle of Marriage Corps. We have those of you who have been in it and have received and harvested fruit. You're now serving as leaders and facilitators, and you're giving away some of the fruits. And isn't that how our Christian walk is supposed to be? Reaching up to God with one hand and out to others with another. To be able to share the bounty that I have been given with others. And so that little garden in my backyard, I didn't ever would think could be able to fill time on a little video thing. But that's how I've been thinking about marriage. There has been a disruption of what has been before. And this is an opportune time to plant seeds. But if you plant seeds of distance, if you plant seeds of protection, if you plant seeds of bitterness, if you plant seeds, then I'm not sure you're going to harvest what you really want to be harvested. But now's the time, in this disruption, in this the toiling of this soil of your life and my life, it's the time to plant seeds. And what's nice is that some years my garden didn't work, and some years it did. You don't give up on it because it was something I loved. Our garage. So you plant the right seeds, do the best you can. You tend it, you do everything you're supposed to do. You don't just let it and walk away. And then you pray that God does what only God can do in those elements that are unknown to you. And then you look for the first signs of fruit, the first signs of life, and you're joyful of that. And you tell people, look, man, we went on a date and it was the best date we've had since I don't even know when. And then if you're blessed and God does what only God can do within, and you're like, yeah, this is the good stuff. In fact, I know a neighbor who sure could use some of this fruit. I think that's the beauty that Marriage Corps provides, Dave. I think that's how we can look differently at this time. The only thing you can do about the past is you can't change it. You can just reframe it. You can look at it differently. And perhaps this is a time that God has broken the soil of your life. And he's saying, come on, plant some seeds. Watch what I can do. Wouldn't that be great? After this season ends, those seeds, my tending, God's divine wisdom, power, and grace, the encouragement of the first fruits, and then the abundance of the harvest that I just want to give away. I want to tell everybody, man, that's what God did in my marriage. Not Marriage Corps, but God through the vehicle of Marriage Corps. And all of you who are faithfully have served through the years, God bless you. Thank you very much for giving me this little time to share what's been on my heart, Dave.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate the exhortation that, there's never a bad time to invest in your marriage.
Right.
And you've broken that down so clearly for us in summary that there are things that are going to be out of our control. We're going to need to knowing that God has divine providence over those things. But then what can we do?
Amen.
Those basic investments. We've always heard of Dave Ramsey's debt snowball. Find the smallest thing you can do and build from there. So, and I'd encourage, as we just apply what you've encouraged, let's find one good thing that we can do for our spouse and build from there. Those things will definitely add up, and to see God bless that in this season will be just such an encouragement. Steve, you're always so practical and so encouraging, and we appreciate that.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate the time. And everyone out there in Marriage Corps, I love you. And may God indeed bless this season. Bless this season for all of you. Absolutely.
Absolutely. We're going to turn it back over to live Dave, and then we'll wrap up and get some instructions for what's coming up next for Marriage Corps and our marriage night here at Stonebriar. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks, Dave.